Hello, MFI. What an honor to be with you here at this incredible regional. I love regionals where pastors are getting loved on, equipped, and poured into. I pray that this is a profitable conversation and discussion, and I pray that everything that happens in these few days together, God just gets glorified and his church grows and expands and accelerates in this season. I love MFI. I love that MFI is my roots. I love that my parents, Pastors Jess and Brenda Strickland, have been part of MFI their whole ministry life. And there's so many things I could say about MFI. We could do session after session just honoring some of our great legacy, like Pastors Dick Iverson and Edie Iverson and Pastors Frank and Sharon DeMazio. My goodness, just legends of the faith. I'm reminded of Pastor Wendell and Jenny Smith, whose legacy even reaches to us today. It's just full of incredible men and women of God, and we're watching as what has happened in previous generations is getting passed on and transferred to the next generation. It is a beautiful thing to see MFI last through the decades and the years. But something that just occurs to me that I appreciate deeply about MFI is MFI has raised up men and women who've stood the test of time in ministry. As we watch the news and we see what's happening in culture, we've watched pastor after pastor fall from quote unquote grace and seen what has happened to their legacy just go up in smoke because of what was happening in their private life, not matching what was happening in their public life. I was recently listening to a podcast with Carl Lentz and Dr. Amen. Dr. Amen is a brain scientist, a brilliant man. And before Carl Lentz had had his whole explosion of his life, he went to Dr. Amen with a friend, and Dr. Amen scanned his brain. And based on that brain scan, he actually told Carl Lentz, he said, "You are headed for a catastrophic fall." Interestingly enough, we know this side of the story, and indeed that was what happened. And I think that when we look at MFI and we look at these pastors who stood the test of time, and when I think of wanting to be a pastor whose life bears up under scrutiny, I think that doesn't just happen by accident. It happens as people forge in private what they then give to the world in public. Annie Dillard says this: how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. And so what we do when nobody's watching defines who we are when the whole world is watching. Today, we're going to talk about the personal disciplines anchor. 2 Timothy 2:3-6 says this: share in suffering as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one serving as a soldier gets entangled in the concerns of civilian life. He seeks to please the commanding officer. Also, if anyone competes as an athlete, he is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. The hard-working farmer ought to be the first to get a share of the crops. My husband is a fire chief, and a few years back, we actually had a house fire, and him and his crew ended up being the first in on that house fire. Now, when my husband came roaring into the property with the sirens going and all the fire engines and fire trucks, he was not actually focused on me. My sons and I were literally still in our pajamas. It was freezing outside, like we have no clothes. Everything is on fire in the house. My husband comes in and his eyes are set on his mission at hand. The mission at hand is actually putting out that fire. He puts out the fire, then he comes over and checks on us. Why? Because at that moment he was a soldier and there wasn't something dual happening in him. He had one mission, one purpose. I recently saw this amazing touchdown by Saquon Barkley, and in it, he actually does this cool reverse twist thing as he's running towards the end zone. He literally jumps backwards up over someone, literally hurdles them. And it's like one of the most amazing plays in football. What do they do instantly after this? They actually do drug testing to see if he was on drugs. Why? Because what he did was so amazing. If you're going to be an athlete, you have to compete and play by the rules. If you don't, you're going to end up as a documentary on Netflix. See, as those who are pastors who are called by Christ to lead and shepherd his church, There are rules that we're supposed to live by, that we're supposed to govern our lives by. The New Testament is full of ways telling us this is how you are to conduct yourself. See, we want to be people who, when our life is held up under scrutiny, just like Barclay, they'll find, man, these people are the real deal. They did that because their lives perfectly reflected Christ. So I want to look today at just 3 practices. I'm a millennial, and so I want to adjust the word from personal disciplines to personal practices that I believe will help us be people whose public self and private self aren't 2 separate entities, but who fuse together so that we can do the mission and the call of God on our lives in our day and time. So we're going to look at something that John the Baptist says. I think John the Baptist is somebody who did a beautiful job of being both the same person in private, in public. And we're going to turn to John 3, chapter 22. Here we see John saying this, John 3:22 through 27. After this, Jesus and his disciples went to the Judean countryside where he spent time with them and baptized. John was also baptizing because there was plenty of water there. People were coming and being baptized since John had not yet been thrown into prison. Then a dispute arose between John's disciples and a Jew about purification. So they came to John and told him, Rabbi, the one you testified about who was with you across the Jordan, he's baptizing and everybody is going to him. And I want us to just pause here and look at this. Here's John the Baptist who, he's a big deal, right? He's the first revivalist, kind of the first celebrity persona pastor, and he's had incredible success, and he's had Jews from all over coming, repenting, being baptized. He's had his 15 minutes of fame, and I bet the people who've gathered to him, his disciples, they also are into that 15-minute of fame. It's not lost on them that their rabbi is a bit of a celebrity, and there's some resentment in them that their rabbi is now no longer the biggest thing happening in town. In fact, here's Jesus, who is now on the rise, and he's becoming a bigger deal than John. And John responds to these statements, and he says this, no one can receive anything unless it has been given to him from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah. And I think the first practice that we want to look at here that's going to connect us to being people whose public and private self fuse is that of position. And I think it's really interesting that John, the one who's supernaturally born, right? His dad has this whole encounter in the holy place with an angel, and he's like, hey, you're going to have a son even though you're barren, even though you shouldn't be able to have a kid, you're going to have a son. And this son is going to be the one who prepares the way for Jesus. I mean, imagine being those parents who have that son and being that son. I have 2 sons. They both play basketball. Let me tell you, it matters to me that they play good. Not that it's the only thing in the world, but they're my sons. I want them to shine. I want them to thrive. I want them to be people who people notice. Why? Because I'm human and I'm a mom. Imagine being raised and raising this kid and having all that pressure. You're a somebody. You're going to make way for Jesus. And then imagine you live this life and you are a somebody and people think you're important and they're coming to you to be baptized. And then the seasons shift. And all of a sudden, all that light and focus that's been on you, it's now shifted to another. I know for a lot of us, I think that would impact how we see ourselves, maybe how we interact with other people. It might create anger and resentment in us. And even though it did create that resentment in his disciples and followers, it doesn't in John the Baptist. And he says just some of the most beautiful words penned in scripture. He says, I am not the Messiah. See, I think that we need practices that position our lives in a place where we say, I am not the Messiah. See, our lives as pastors are so often ruled by reacting to the urgent and the immediate. I think we need practices in the face of that urgency that say, hey, I'm not the Messiah. I can't actually fix people's problems. I can't actually stave what's happening in the church and make it just perfect in an instant. I think we also as people who sometimes view ourselves as, I'm the pastor, I think we get busy. And I think our refusal to properly rest and slow to be with the Messiah is sometimes a way that we tell ourselves, I'm the Messiah. See, I think sometimes when we pursue our own fame, our own celebrity, our own exceptionalism, I think what we're saying is, I want to be the Messiah. See, I'm not the Messiah. And one of the biggest helps for me in discovering that was the practice of Sabbathing. As my husband and I took the journey to just take a day where we're not going to be on our phones, we're not going to be 100% available to people, we're not going to be taken up with our own sense of grandeur and importance. And as we stopped, and as we stop and say, hey, God, you're in charge of the world, you're in charge of the church, you're in charge of our family, and our delight is to delight in you and to delight in one another, what we discovered is that it naturally worked within us something that said, I am not the Messiah. See, God's got me, God's got my family, God's got the church, God's got my children, God's got my marriage, God's got my finances. But if I'm constantly the one maneuvering and doing things to make it happen, I miss being able to position myself at a place where I can just say, hands off, I'm not the Messiah. So we need these practices that position us to be with the Messiah so that we are able to say, I'm not the Messiah. So I'd love to invite you to consider your devotional habits. Do you have them? Do you need to go deeper in them? What about your prayer habits? What about your Sabbath and rest habits? Consider your fasting habits. How are we positioning our life with the Messiah so what we say about him actually is experienced with him? John goes on and it says this, he says, you yourself can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but I have been sent ahead of him. He who has the bride is the groom, but the groom's friend who stands by and listens for him rejoices greatly at the groom's voice. So this joy of mine is complete. Imagine this man who is a somebody, this man whose dad had the angel visit. He's saying, not only am I not the Messiah and I'm okay with it, but my great joy is to prepare the way for the one who is the Messiah. Whoa, the humility of John is incredible. May God make us as pastors and preachers and leaders, may he make us John the Baptist in our day and time. I mean, this is a revivalist who understands that revival only happens when we're preparing the way for Jesus to enter culture, to enter our churches, to enter community. And so just as we need practices and disciplines that position us with Jesus, we need practices and disciplines that allow us to prepare the way of Jesus. We need practices of preparation. See, I believe preparation is proof of humility. Now, I know what most of you are thinking. You're thinking, listen, I'm amazing. I am a pastor. I'm a preacher. What I do is prepare sermons. And you do. And you're brilliant. And you're amazing. And I don't want to diminish that. But I wonder if for a moment we can pause and consider the body and the breadth of what we do as pastors is so much more than preaching. We actually meet with people. We counsel people. We run groups. We run board meetings. We have people we mentor that we do one-on-one with. We actually meet with other pastors. There's so much that we do. May I invite us to consider that preparation may be more than just getting ready to do a talk like this or preach on Sunday morning. I was adjusted by a pastor named Pete Scazzaro several years ago when he talked about his own inadequacy in running meetings and running one-on-ones. And he said that he adjusted himself and began to put great care into the preparation of those spaces. And I decided that actually I was going to treat meetings and one-on-ones and staff meetings and Any place that I lead, I was going to treat my preparation process just like I would that of preaching. You may say that's silly, maybe, but I knew that I wanted to get better at helping leaders get to where they're supposed to go. I knew I wanted to get better at coaching the next generation of leaders coming up and giving to them from not just my strengths or my good ideas, but my weaknesses as well. And so I've let that adjustment come to my life, that adjustment of preparation across all areas. I was recently listening to a podcast with a pastor named Al Gordon from Saints Church in England. It was just a brilliant podcast where he was defining terms like revival and renewal and reformation. It was absolutely brilliant. But he said something that arrested me. He said that in the season of life that he's in, he is not just preparing sermons to wow and amaze people. He's putting the same level of preparation into the prayer of the sermons. And again, I felt like God adjusted me in the area of preparation. It is my joy to prepare the way for Jesus. And honestly, it is my joy to prepare the way for Jesus in my sermons. It's something I love to do. The craft of preaching is one of my favorite things. The craft of communication is one of my favorite things. But it has to equally be my joy to prepare the way for Jesus in every area of my life, whether it's church or family. I have actually found that one of the places of most spiritual discipline in my life has actually become when I meal prep for my family so that my 6'4" son, who I feel like needs 10 meals a day, has something to eat. That has been a place that I put as great of delight as I do preaching, and I found that it's borne amazing fruit even in my son and my relationship. So here's my question. Am I preparing the way for Jesus? So consider your practices of preparation for preaching. Don't stop there. In fact, actually, if you're a preacher and you haven't been preparing and you've been going to the internet for your sermons, let's consider that as plagiarism, not preparation. And let's say, God, expand me, do something there. But how are your practices of preparation for meetings, for discipleship, for counseling, for your day? How are you eating? How are you sleeping? How are you working out for your week? How are you resting? How are you refreshing? How are you working hours in your day? How are you taking family meals and eating around the table? How are you on your phone? Are you getting off your phone? It must be our joy to prepare the way of Jesus. Jesus, help us become John the Baptist in this area. Then finally, our third practice, John says this famous line, it's on a lot of t-shirts. He must increase, but I must decrease. I'm finding this to be one of my daily and constant prayers as a pastor and a preacher. See, not only do we need a practice that postures us to be with Jesus, and a practice of preparation that allows us to make the way for Jesus in every area. But we need a practice that postures us in a place of decrease. Now, I know none of us like that. As an American, as a charismatic, as a pastor, I want to increase, I want to accelerate, I want to grow. Why do we never name a conference Decrease Conference? Because we don't want to decrease, we want to increase. But here's the invitation. I think God is asking us as pastors to be those who lay our lives down for those we serve, those we lead, those we shepherd, so that the way of Jesus can increase, that his name be glorified, that his name be proclaimed. So, how are we setting our life up to decrease instead of increase? You're like, wait, what? I want to be exceptional. As do I. I'm a firstborn, I'm a PK, I'm a female pastor, I'm a hard charger, I'm an achiever. I want to be exceptional. But you know what? More than wanting to be exceptional, I want to be like Jesus. And I want my life to reflect him in all things and how I treat people. I recently saw an Instagram video of a pastor coming into church, and he has like a coat over his shoulders and his Bible, and he comes walking in, and he has people taking off his coat, and he has people spraying the chair before he sits down, and he has people wet wiping his hands, and he has people opening the Bible for him. Everything he does, he has people serving him. And although a joke, it's an honest critique, because I think as pastors, it's so easy to have that mindset. And I think that the way of Jesus is not that. The way of Jesus is riding on a donkey into the city humbly stopping and serving those who gather to him. So I was watching the Starting Five on Netflix the other day. I love sports documentaries, and I love Anthony Edwards. He's so cute and adorable, and just, yes, next Michael Jordan, all the things. But as we were watching it, my husband and I kept turning to one another, and we kept saying, oh my goodness, we're ruining this young man's life. He is, I believe, 24 years old, and everything in life, he has people orbiting him, surrounding him, worshiping him. And I was like, wow, what is the cost to our soul to be worshiped on that level? I think as pastors, we have to constantly be moving our lives away from people and situations orbiting us, worshiping us, giving us too much honor so that we can decrease so that God may increase. One of my favorite theologians, a man by the name of Henry Nouwen, he's talking about the three temptations of Jesus, and he says, really, the devil was tempting Jesus to be spectacular, to be relevant, and to be powerful. And if I'm being honest, the desire of my heart often is to be all those things. Right now, I want to wow you with what I'm saying. I want you to be like, wow, what she's saying is so relevant. And then I want to have power over those I lead. Now, you might say, I'm nothing like that. Good for you. You figured it out. But I think if we're honest in our heart of hearts, all of us as pastors long to be spectacular, to be relevant, to be powerful. That's why aging is so difficult. Why? Because our relevancy diminishes, our spectacularness diminishes, our power actually diminishes. We long for these things, but the way of Jesus and the way of John the Baptist is we're constantly decreasing so that he may increase. So I want us to consider our practices of being with the people we shepherd. Timothy Keller says that our church should never be bigger than our ability to meet with every person in it. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Do you know our ability to be with people is just to make ourselves available for meetings, for coffees, for conversation? The other day I was at church and I had something really urgent I was needing to attend to at a service. And this woman stopped me and was hesitant to talk to me, but I knew she wanted to tell me something. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I have places to be. And then I remembered Jesus with Jairus on the way to his daughter, and he stops for the woman with the issue of blood. And I just stopped. And this woman started telling me about a potential diagnosis, and I got to pray with her. And I was just thinking, man, there's nothing more important in this moment than me being with her. I also want us to consider our practices of serving with our church, our staff, our volunteers. Do they serve us or do we serve with them? One of my practices is at events. I try to, at some point in time, get in the kitchen and get my hands on dishes. Why? Because it just puts me in check and reminds me I'm not above anything and I'm not above anyone. We're all in this together. We're serving the kingdom together. We're serving the church together. I must decrease. He must increase. And then finally, I want us to consider our practices of sharing with the community. See, so often we're the people speaking to the community, at the community. But what if we were people who shared with the community, even in our communication? See, I know vulnerability is a gimmick that we can use for speaking, and I appreciate that, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is inviting people into our flawed and frail and fragile spaces and saying, hey, I'm with you. I'm not apart from you. I'm not above you. I'm not other than you. I'm with you. I'm human too. Here's my brokenness. I can connect with you on your brokenness. And then finally, I want us to consider our practices of transferring, not just entire churches, but are we really transferring those parts of church that are fun to handle and do ourselves? Are we making space for people in pulpits? Are we making space for people in leadership and management? Are we creating structures where other people get to share the load with us? And then finally, are we getting this beautiful thing called church transferred to the next generation in every area? I'm not the Messiah. My joy is in preparing the way for another. He must increase. I must decrease. May God continue to grace us with practices of position, preparation, and posture so that our public and private self remain complete and whole. May there be no splinters or fusion. I recently heard a song from a gentleman named Benjamin Hastings. A lot of you know who he is. He's a Hillsong worship leader. Amazing. And in it, he sings these words: I've been blessed and I've been cursed. I've been healed and I've been hurt. But for better or for worse, I'm still here singing. I've been lost and I've been found. I've been raised up and I've been knocked back down. Probably should have left by now, but thank God I didn't, because I still see you in it. See, honestly, the first time I heard this song, I was overcome. I actually wept and I just kept listening to it because I'm like, this is the story of my life. If you have years and miles, which all of you do in the church, we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've wanted to quit. We've wanted to leave so many times. But the story of our life is, thank God I didn't leave. Thank God I stayed here. See, but I think the reality is, just like that's the story of the church, it's the story of us. I'm complicated. I'm messy. But I'm actually gifted and I'm passionate and I'm a lover of people. And see, I can be looked at and people can be like, man, you've done this wrong and you've done that wrong. But then also they can look at me and they can say, you did this right and you did that right. I've got mixed motives. You've got mixed motives. I love Jesus with everything inside of me. I love his church and I love people. And yet I want to be exceptional. I might even want to be better than another pastor or wife or mom. I want to be seen. I want to be admired. I want to be praised. But I also die for you. I'm humble. I'm kind. I'm collaborative. I'm honoring. I'm unselfish. I'm a mixed bag. I'm complicated. And my prayer isn't God make me perfect, but God continue to let what's seen in me be a reflection of what you are working in here. And may all who experience me see you in me. Bless you as you continue on in these practices of position, preparation, and posture.